Clark. I'm the Global Senior Partner of INS. And what I want to talk to you about for the next 18 minutes is a subject that I'm really passionate about, which is our youth of today and the role that they will play in tomorrow. And what I'm talking about is Generation Z, our future leaders. And what I want to get to as we work through this talk together is explaining who are Generation Z, what are the kind of challenges that they're going to face, and what can we do to pave the way for them? What's our role in this development? So when we're talking about this, we're talking about our young seafarers, our executives in shipping, our young lawyers. Now, I'm going to talk to you a lot about my crystal ball, about looking to the future, about the kind of changes that I think this generation will see, and like I say, what we can do to help them prepare. But I'm actually going to start off by telling you a story, if I can. And in order to tell you that story, I'm actually going to go back in time. I'm going to go back a long way in time. I'm going to go to the 6th century and tell you a story that comes from a book called the Mabinogion. It's part of Welsh tradition and folklore, but also steeped in fact and history, and a historical character called Taliesin, but also the fictional or romantic side of Taliesin, which is he was no other than the bard to King Arthur and was said to be the teacher of Merlin, the great wise man of the Arthurian court. So the story starts like this. There's a young boy called Gwion Bach, and Gwion is the servant to a wise woman called Caredwyn. And Caredwyn has been making this brew, has been creating this essence in a cauldron. And what she's aiming to do is to create the essence of all knowledge and inspiration, what in the Welsh we talk about as being the Arwen. And it's taken her a year to pull together all the ingredients for this magical brew. And it's very important that the temperature is monitored so that the brew will only come to a boil exactly at the right moment. And this is Gwion's job, Gwion Bach. Gwion Bach is employed to stir the cauldron and make sure that it doesn't come to the boil too early, while Caredwyn goes and finds ingredients from all over the land. And he's been doing this for 12 months, and he's been working all night, a bit like a young trainee lawyer or a seafarer on board a vessel, getting very little sleep, but concentrating on his task. But the task and the tiredness and the effort get the better of him. And almost at the moment when the brew's going to be ready, he falls asleep. And of course, what then happens is a bubble starts to form on the base of the cauldron, and it slowly rises up through the brew until it comes onto the surface and it bursts. And 3 drops from that bubble land on Gwion Bach's thumb because they're burning hot. So 2 things happen. One is it wakes him up, and the second thing is he puts his thumb in his mouth because it's burning. And in that moment, he has all knowledge of everything, because he has consumed the Arwen, the 3 drops of inspiration. Now, because he now knows everything, he also knows that Caredwyn, the wise woman, is aware of what's happened. So she's on her way back to her cottage to punish young Gwion Bach. So using his new knowledge, he transforms himself into the form of a hare and he runs out of the cottage. But Caredwyn changes herself into the form of a fox and she chases him, and he feels the breath and the teeth of the fox snapping at his neck. And he sees a river, so he leaps into the river and transforms himself into a salmon so he can swim away. But Caredwyn changes herself into an otter, and again, as a fish, he can feel the otter catching him up. So he's coming to a salmon leap, and he leaps out of the salmon leap and transforms himself into a bird. But Caredwin changes herself into a hawk and soars above him, and he's going to swoop down on him, and he knows that that's going to be his end. So looking down, he sees a field of wheat, and he decides he'll turn himself into a single grain, a single ear of wheat, and he drops into the field. But Caredwin changes herself into a hen, and she works her way through the field until she finds that one grain of wheat, which is Gwionbark, and she consumes it. And 9 months later, Caredwin is with child. And when she gives birth and she sees the baby, she's still consumed with anger for the frustration of losing this brew that could ever be made once, only ever be made once. But she can't destroy the child. So she sets the child adrift on the waters, and the story tells you that the child is discovered by a character called Elfin. And when Elfin finds the baby and he unwraps the swaddling bands, he sees the shining brow, because the head of this baby just illuminates all this knowledge. And he says, "What a radiant brow." And radiant brow in the ancient Welsh is Taliesin. And so Taliesin is born, this amazing character that has all this knowledge, that is born with this knowledge and goes off to do all these amazing things. Now, what makes me tell you that story from the 6th century in Wales? Well, partly the original Inson Co., 151 years old this year, was formed in Wales as a Welsh firm. And then now, together with Gordon Dad's, the new Ince, Gordon Dad's also a firm that started life in Wales, and we have offices in Wales. So it's perhaps right for me to be able to share that connection. But obviously there's a more important reason for the purposes of this talk, and that is to align this character from Welsh history, Taliesin, born with instant knowledge, to Generation Z and what they have been born with. Now, let me ask all of you a question. Frustrated that we're not live together in an audience to do this, but bear with me. I want you to have a think about and shout at the screen in your iPhone the answer to this. What have the following got in common? So Alexa, Siri, iPads, Instagram, meal kit delivery, and domestic drones, consumer drones. Now, if we were together, I'd go around you, I'd take votes and get you to shout out answers. But I can't do that, so let me give you the answer. None of those things existed before 2010. They're only 11 years old. Can you believe that? And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about Generation Z. So who are Generation Z? Well, from a time perspective, we're looking at a period between the mid-90s and the early 20s. So 1995 to, say, 2015. So that means that our oldest Generation Zs are 26. They're already with us in our companies, at sea, in our law firms. But the youngest ones are only 6. But what we can say is that by 2050, and I take 2050 because that's such a milestone for our industry. It's the date of the UK's Maritime Strategy Report. It's the date of another series of key events that we look towards. Well, by that point, 2050, Generation Z will be embedded in our law firms, in our commercial operations, and our crews at sea. And this generation are truly revolutionary. They're like nothing we've ever seen before. Taliesin-esque, they've come into being with this incredible range of knowledge, of technology. This is a generation that an event like the tragic events of 9/11 are ancient history for them. They're locked in the past. iPhone launched in 2007. In 2007, the oldest members of Generation Z were 10. They're more radically and ethically diverse and more racially diverse than any generation we've seen. They're targeted to be the highest educated generation that we've ever seen. and they think very differently. They have an ability to shift between work and play. And that agility of life is really central and core and important to them. They have much higher expectations. They want things done, and they want things done now. And if things don't work out, if things aren't fixed, if things aren't there fast, then something is wrong. And this is not a generation that will stick around to see if that will change. They will vote with their feet and they will move on. They have a desire for uniqueness in life, which transmits into their work environment. I'm really excited about this generation. And they're far more global than any generation we've seen before. So what kind of issues can we predict that this generation will face? What kind of issues will this all-knowledgeable generation face? What challenges will they meet that we have not had to meet? Well, there are a series of them. One of them is the increasing age of the population. Currently, we have around 500,000 centenarians. Research predicts that that number is going to increase 50 times, so that by 2100, we will have 26 million centenarians. As a result of global warming and environmental concerns and raising of sea level, it sounds like science fiction, but it's a fact that we will lose areas of current landmass. We could, in fact, lose entire regions and even some coastal cities as we look to the future. And then there's geopolitical tension. Regretfully, we can't say that the future is showing us a pathway to a reduction in geopolitical tension. I fear that we are looking forward to a period, looking forward's the wrong thing to say, but a period of increased geopolitical tension. We only need to look at the recent conflict in Israel and Palestine to see that we've seen a new development, neighbour-on-neighbour conflict. That's never been there before. And that is really disturbing because historically, of course, we have seen neighbour-on-neighbour conflict and we know what that leads to. So that's something this generation are going to have to deal with. And then we'll see an increase in technology, and because of that, we'll see an increase in the use of cyber as a weapon. So whether that be by geopolitical activists, whether that be by terrorists, whether that be by criminals, we're liable to see a greater role for cyber intrusion and the need for cyber defense. And then finally, we will see an increase in automation and the use of artificial intelligence and the increase of digitalization. Now, there's a whole other talk about artificial intelligence and how that may change the world. And you can go on a rainbow journey between science fiction and the prediction that artificial intelligence will actually surpass human intelligence. And maybe that is science fiction, but maybe not. But what we can be certain of when we transit that rainbow is that the effect automation and AI will have on our workforce. More and more of what we do will be able to be done by machines. And what that means is we will create greater leisure time. And when you add to that the fact that Generation Z is a generation that understand the balance between work and play, and not just understand that balance, but desire that balance, that's something we've got to deal with. So what can we do today to pave the way for tomorrow? What can we do to prepare our Generation Z and prepare ourselves for this change? Well, the first thing I'd say to everybody is we need to abandon our current mindset. We need to embrace technology and we need to embrace this new generation. We need to be working with them and talking to them and understanding what it is that drives them. We need to embed within our organizations a culture of diversity and inclusion and environmental concern, because not only is that morally right, and not only is that right for the planet that we live on, but it's right and essential for that group of individuals that are going to be our future leaders. This generation are the custodians not only of our future, but of our heritage. And personally, I'm really excited about this generation coming forward, because I spend a lot of my time talking to our younger people at INS, and their passion for these issues really creates in me a sense of awe, a sense of inspiration and enthusiasm. So my message to everybody is, let's engage with them now. Let's work with them now and create this future for ourselves, but more importantly for them. Abraham Lincoln said this: the best way to predict the future is to create it. Thank you.